Look around you. Empires rise and fall, loyalties shatter, and the most steadfast allies vanish with the winds of fortune. We are taught to seek strength in numbers, in love, in fleeting virtue. But what if that very pursuit of connection is the architects of your downfall? What if the path to true, unyielding power, to becoming utterly unshakable, demands a chilling solitude? For in a world where everyone is a wolf in sheep's clothing, depending on another is a pact with oblivion. The modern world, much like its ancient predecessors, whispers sweet illusions into the ears of the ambitious. It speaks of strength in unity, resilience in community, and an unshakable spirit forged in the fires of shared purpose and mutual affection. We are encouraged to build networks, to foster alliances, to seek comfort and counsel in the embrace of others. We are taught that true power emerges from the collective will, that vulnerability is a bridge to deeper bonds, and that a leader's greatest asset is the love and loyalty of their people. This is the narrative of the idealist, a shimmering tapestry woven with threads of hope, empathy, and the naive belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. But for those who have dared to observe the true mechanics of power, for those who have seen the swift and brutal unraveling of empires built on such fragile foundations, this narrative is a dangerous lullaby. It is a story designed to pacify the masses, to keep them compliant, and to ultimately render them utterly defenseless when the inevitable storms of reality arrive. The idealist, caught in the intoxicating embrace of these comforting fictions, believes that unwavering moral rectitude and a benevolent heart will shield them from treachery and misfortune. They expect gratitude for kindness, loyalty for generosity, and steadfastness for shared dreams. They build their castles on sand, relying on the fickle tides of human emotion and the ever-shifting sands of circumstance. Consider the countless figures throughout history who, armed with good intentions and popular support, found themselves abandoned at the precipice of ruin. Those who believed that kindness alone would secure their throne, that genuine affection would prevent betrayal, or that moral superiority would deter aggressive rivals. They are the tragic heroes of forgotten ballads, their downfall a stark testament to the perilous folly of idealism. Their mistake was fundamental. They built their strategy on how men ought to behave, rather than confronting the uncomfortable, immutable truth of how men do behave. They envisioned a world populated by noble citizens and loyal subjects, only to discover a landscape teeming with opportunists, self-serving sycophants, and predators waiting for the slightest sign of weakness. Their unwavering belief in shared humanity became their greatest vulnerability, turning their moral compass into a blindfold in a world of knives. Visuals: a rapid montage of historical betrayals, assassinations, and collapses of popular figures. Images of crowds turning against their leaders, a single dripping candle flame in a dark room. Now, let us turn to the unvarnished, chilling philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli, a mind forged in the crucible of Florentine political upheaval. Machiavelli offers no comforting illusions, no saccharine promises of universal love or inherent goodness. He presents a mirror reflecting humanity in its rawest, most unadorned form, self-interested, fickle, opportunistic, and prone to malice when fear is absent and gain is promised. His core teaching, radical and unsettling to the uninitiated, is that a ruler, or anyone seeking to exert influence and maintain stability, must learn how not to be good and to use or not to use this knowledge according to the exigencies of the case. This is not a call to wanton evil, but an urgent, pragmatic instruction to cast aside sentimental notions and to embrace the stark reality of human nature as the primary terrain of power. To become truly unshakable, to stand alone without faltering, one must first dismantle the illusion that strength comes from dependence. Machiavelli understands that reliance on others, whether for love, loyalty, or resources, inherently introduces a point of failure. Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, and they will break the bonds of affection when their own self-interest is at stake. Therefore, the prince who wishes to endure must cultivate a profound, almost chilling self-reliance. This is not merely about physical independence, but a deep psychological and strategic autonomy. It means making decisions unburdened by the need for approval, acting decisively without the paralysis of moral qualms, and executing plans without being swayed by the fluctuating allegiances of subordinates or allies. Machiavelli's philosophy reframes the problem entirely. In the context of learn to stand alone and become unshakable, his wisdom dictates that true resilience is not found in external support, but in internal fortitude and a mastery of the tools of power. It means understanding that while virtue might win you friends in times of peace, it is the capacity to employ both virtue and its opposite, vice, that secures your position when the winds turn tempestuous. The ability to be feared when love is not possible, to be cunning when honesty is suicidal, to be decisive when hesitation means ruin, these are the true instruments of an unshakable will. The observation of human nature, in its most brutal and cynical form, becomes the initial weapon of the prince. By knowing the darkness within others, one can prepare for it, counter it, and ultimately transcend the vulnerabilities that plague those who remain naive. To stand alone, then, is to possess the wisdom and the courage to be your own foundation, your own shield, and your own unwavering sword. For love is a bond of obligation which men, being base, break when it suits them, but fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. Comment "unshakable" to understand this truth, and subscribe for the next lessons on maintaining your state. Having cast aside the comforting fictions of idealists, we now turn our gaze to the formidable architecture of genuine self-sustaining power. The unshakable individual, the true prince in spirit, does not merely survive the storms of life, he navigates them with deliberate intent, his trajectory dictated by his own formidable will. This mastery is not a gift of birth, nor a product of popular acclamation, but a painstakingly cultivated skill built upon the bedrock of Machiavellian principles. To truly stand alone, to become an immovable force, one must understand and internalize the foundational tenets that transform a mere mortal into a titan of strategic prowess. The first, and perhaps most crucial of these tenets, is the dynamic interplay between virtù and fortuna. Most men view their lives as a cruel lottery, a series of random occurrences dictated by capricious fate. They are buffeted by circumstances, their fortunes rising and falling with the unpredictable whims of external events. They blame the gods, the stars, or their rivals for their misfortunes, and credit chance for their successes. Such individuals are perpetually vulnerable, their stability contingent upon factors entirely beyond their control. This is the antithesis of the unshakable spirit. Machiavelli teaches us that fortuna, or fortune, destiny, luck, call it what you will, controls but half of our actions. The other half, the truly decisive half, is governed by our virtù. Virtù is not moral virtue in the conventional sense. It is a blend of exceptional skill, foresight, courage, adaptability, and an unyielding will to act decisively. It is the capacity to impose one's will upon circumstances, to seize opportunities that others fail to perceive, and to mitigate or even transform adversities into advantages. The individual possessing virtù does not merely react to events. They anticipate, they plan, they create the conditions for their success. Consider the metaphor of a raging river. The common man, lacking virtù, simply drowns or is swept away by its currents, lamenting his cruel fate. The idealist might attempt to build a flimsy bridge of goodwill, which quickly collapses. But the individual of profound virtù foresees the flood during times of calm. He prepares dikes and embankments, not to stop the river, but to channel it, to harness its power, or to protect his own domain from its destructive force. When the flood inevitably comes, he does not merely survive. He stands firm or even redirects the torrent to irrigate his fields, while his less prepared neighbors are consumed. To stand alone, therefore, means to rely not on the benevolence of fortuna or the aid of others, but on the raw, unadulterated power of one's own virtù. It is the self-assurance that no matter the crisis, no matter the betrayal, you possess the internal resources, the intellect, the courage, the strategic acumen to navigate it. This mental framework liberates one from the debilitating fear of the unknown and the crushing weight of external dependencies. When your strength is derived from within, from your own cultivated capabilities, no outside force can truly shake your foundation. The unshakable leader is one who, when stripped of all allies and resources, retains the capacity to rebuild, to adapt, to overcome, solely through the sheer force of their own exceptional abilities. Next, we delve into the dual nature essential for the solitary sovereign, the lion and the fox. Machiavelli famously articulates the necessity for a prince to emulate both these creatures. To be only a lion, powerful and formidable, is to risk falling into traps set by the cunning. To be only a fox, shrewd and deceptive, is to lack the raw power to deter the wolves. The unshakable individual embodies both. The lion represents raw strength, intimidation, and the capacity for overwhelming force. It is the ability to project an aura of such formidable power that potential adversaries are cowed into submission, or at least deterred from direct confrontation. When you stand alone, your presence must be your ultimate defense. This means cultivating a reputation for decisive action, for swift and unyielding responses to challenges, and for possessing resources that few would dare to test. It is the perception that challenging you would incur a cost far too great, a price no one is willing to pay. This aspect of the lion protects against overt aggression and disrespect. It secures your boundaries and commands a necessary deference from others. When you have no allies to call upon, your own imposing stature must suffice. Conversely, the fox represents cunning, shrewdness, and the ability to detect and evade traps. In a world populated by schemers and manipulators, brute force alone is insufficient. The unshakable individual must be keenly perceptive, able to read intentions, uncover plots, and anticipate betrayals before they materialize. This involves a mastery of deception, the ability to conceal one's true motives, and to sow confusion among one's adversaries. It means understanding the hidden currents of human motivation, recognizing the subtle tells of disloyalty, and employing stratagems to outmaneuver those who would seek to undermine your position. The fox ensures that while others may be strong, they are never too clever for you. This intellectual agility is critical when you rely solely on your own wits for survival, when there is no trusted advisor to whisper warnings in your ear. It is the self-sufficiency of mind that keeps you one step ahead, perpetually aware of the unseen dangers that lie in wait. Together, the lion and the fox create a comprehensive defense for the individual who stands alone. They allow for both overt and covert protection, ensuring that one is neither easily ambushed nor directly overwhelmed. A leader who embodies both becomes a paradox, seemingly isolated, yet incredibly resilient, precisely because they possess the full spectrum of necessary responses within themselves. Finally, let us address the nuanced and often misunderstood concept of the use of cruelty. This is not an endorsement of indiscriminate violence, but a pragmatic recognition that in certain extreme circumstances, decisive and swift action, even if harsh, is necessary to secure one's position and prevent greater chaos. Machiavelli distinguishes between cruelties well used and ill used. Cruelties well used are those committed at a stroke, out of the necessity of securing one's life, and are not persisted in afterwards unless they can be turned to the advantage of the subjects. They are surgical, applied once and for a specific, clear strategic purpose: to eliminate immediate threats, to assert authority unequivocally, or to remove sources of instability that could lead to prolonged suffering. They are acts designed to establish a new order quickly and prevent further bloodshed. For the individual striving to be unshakable and to stand alone, this principle translates to the brutal efficiency with which one severs ties that threaten one's autonomy or eliminates vulnerabilities that invite exploitation. It means having the fortitude to make exceptionally difficult decisions that, while perhaps morally repugnant to some, are absolutely essential for the preservation of one's power and independence. This could manifest as cutting off unreliable allies, dismissing incompetent but popular subordinates, or definitively silencing detractors who actively undermine one's authority. These are actions taken not out of malice, but out of a cold, calculated necessity to consolidate one's own power, thereby rendering oneself less susceptible to external pressures and ensuring one's self-reliance. The crucial distinction is that these acts are swift, not prolonged, and ultimately serve to create a stable environment where one's solitary position is secure, rather than fostering perpetual resentment and rebellion. The purpose is to remove the very possibility of external forces or internal weaknesses, compromising your unshakable stance. Consider the leader who, upon seizing power, hesitates to eliminate the lingering pockets of resistance or to firmly establish new laws out of a desire to be seen as merciful. This ill-used mercy often leads to prolonged instability, renewed rebellion, and ultimately greater suffering for all, including the leader himself. Conversely, the leader who acts decisively and, if necessary, severely in the immediate aftermath, establishing an unchallengeable order, often creates a more stable and peaceful long-term environment, paradoxically, through an initial display of harshness. This is the calculated ruthlessness that allows one to stand alone, free from the constant need to negotiate or appease, having decisively eliminated the forces that would compel such dependencies. Through the mastery of virtù over fortuna, the strategic implementation of the lion's strength and the fox's cunning, and the judicious, if necessary, use of decisive force, the individual transcends the vulnerabilities of ordinary men. They become a self-contained unit of power, their resilience drawn from an internal wellspring of strategic genius and unwavering resolve. This is how one builds the pillars of an acquired power that is not gifted, not lent, but forged from one's own indomitable will, a power that allows one to stand truly, definitively alone, and to become utterly unshakable. Having established the foundational pillars of virtù, cunning, and calculated decisiveness, the aspiring prince must now master the most intricate battleground of all, the human mind, both his own and that of the populace. To stand truly alone and become unshakable is not merely about accumulating physical or strategic advantages. It is a profound psychological undertaking. It demands a relentless self-mastery, a detachment from conventional morality, and an almost artistic talent for shaping perception. The world is a stage, and every action of the solitary leader is a calculated performance, designed to reinforce an image of unyielding power and absolute autonomy. The first and often most arduous conflict for the prince is the internal war. Within every individual resides a cacophony of voices, the voice of conscience, of empathy, of societal norms, of the innate human desire for approval and affection. These are the very voices that paralyze the idealist, rendering him indecisive, hesitant, and ultimately weak. To become unshakable, the prince must conquer this internal dissent. He must achieve a profound detachment from the emotional and moral considerations that bind lesser men. This does not imply becoming a soulless automaton, but rather elevating strategic imperative above personal sentiment. The initial victory is waged against one's own hesitation. The internal resistance to doing what is necessary, however unpalatable, for the ultimate objective of stability and self-preservation. It is the recognition that in the brutal arena of power, sentiment is a luxury, a weakness that swiftly invites exploitation. The unshakable leader understands that he cannot afford the internal debates that would sap his resolve or cloud his judgment. His decisions must be clear, swift, and entirely rational, devoid of the emotional baggage that can lead to fatal errors. This requires a ruthless introspection, an honest reckoning with one's own predispositions, and a deliberate cultivation of an objective, almost clinical worldview. He must learn to view his own emotions, his own moral inclinations, as variables to be managed, not as masters to be served. Only by winning this internal war can he ensure that his actions are always aligned with his strategic goals, unimpeded by the fleeting tides of personal feeling or the demands of a conventional conscience. Once the internal landscape is disciplined, the prince turns his attention to the external world, mastering the manipulation of public perception. This is where the art of power truly comes into its own. Most men are guided by what they see, not by what they know to be true. Men in general judge more by the eye than by the hand, for all can see what you appear to be, but few can feel what you really are. This timeless observation is the cornerstone of projecting unshakable authority. The goal is not merely to be powerful, but to be perceived as invincibly powerful, self-sufficient, and entirely beyond the reach of ordinary vulnerabilities. This brings us to Machiavelli's famous dilemma: whether it is better to be loved than feared, or vice versa. His pragmatic conclusion is unequivocal. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. So this is not a crude endorsement of tyranny, but a profound insight into human psychology. Love, being a bond of obligation, is contingent upon the self-interest of those who offer it. Men are inherently ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, and they will break the bonds of affection when a better opportunity arises, or when fear of punishment is absent. Their love is easily lost, forgotten, or subverted. Fear, conversely, is maintained by a dread of punishment, a constant apprehension of consequences that never fails. It is a far more reliable guarantor of obedience and stability, especially for one who stands alone. The objective is not to be hated, for hatred provokes active rebellion and makes any solitary position precarious. Rather, it is to instill a profound respect, an awe so deep that disobedience becomes unthinkable, an act of sheer madness. This calculated fear creates an invisible wall around the prince, protecting his solitude and reinforcing his unshakable status. It ensures that even in the absence of genuine affection, his commands are obeyed, his authority unchallenged, and his safety secured by the very apprehensions he has carefully cultivated in the minds of his subjects. His isolation becomes a source of dread rather than an invitation for attack. This leads directly into the intricate process of building the facade. Every public act, every utterance, every gesture of the prince must be a carefully orchestrated performance designed to reinforce the desired reputation. Machiavelli advises that a prince should appear to possess certain qualities: merciful, faithful, humane, religious, upright. However, he also cautions that the prince should have a mind so disposed that, when it is needful to be otherwise, you may be able to change to the contrary. The external presentation is a strategic costume, not a reflection of inherent moral character. The unshakable leader, standing alone, understands that his reputation is his most potent weapon and his most impenetrable armor. It is the tool by which he controls the judgment of the people, shaping their perceptions of his capabilities and his intentions. If he appears merciful, it is to soften resistance and garner goodwill when convenient. If he appears religious, it is to tap into the deeply held beliefs of the populace, lending divine legitimacy to his rule. But behind this carefully constructed veil, the prince retains the absolute freedom to act in whatever manner is required to secure his position and maintain his unshakable autonomy. Each element of this facade is designed to create a consistent, powerful narrative around the leader. The populace must believe in his strength, his wisdom, his resolve, and his unwavering commitment to maintaining order, even if that order is enforced through his solitary, unyielding will. He projects an image of self-sufficiency so complete that external threats seem to bounce off him, and internal dissent withers in his formidable presence. This constructed persona allows him to operate with a degree of freedom and decisiveness that would be impossible for a leader constrained by genuine moral obligations or public sentiment. His isolation, far from being a weakness, becomes a pedestal upon which his magnificent, unshakable image is displayed for all to behold, compelling obedience and ensuring his enduring power through the sheer force of carefully managed appearance. He becomes a living monument to his own strategic genius, his solitary reign a testament to his unparalleled mastery of both internal discipline and external theatricality. You have navigated the treacherous currents of human idealism, deciphered the unvarnished truths of Machiavelli's doctrine, and forged the psychological resilience to stand utterly alone. You comprehend the raw power of virtue, the dual nature of the lion and the fox, and the strategic imperative of fear over fleeting affection. You've honed your inner resolve and mastered the grand theatricality of public perception. Now, before we reveal how to solidify your legacy and ascend to a truly unshakable zenith, ensure your commitment to this profound wisdom. Subscribe, for the ultimate insights into enduring power are reserved for those ready to act decisively, unburdened by the illusions of the common herd. The true test of the solitary sovereign is not merely the acquisition of power, but its execution and timing, the precise moment of the masterstroke that transforms a precarious position into an impregnable fortress. According to Machiavelli, this decisive action is the zenith of virtù, capitalizing on a fleeting window of opportunity carved by Fortuna. It is not a haphazard outburst of aggression, but a meticulously planned singular act designed to fundamentally restructure the landscape of power in one's favor, eliminating all lingering vulnerabilities and entrenching one's independent authority. This ultimate maneuver often involves actions that would horrify the uninitiated, yet are indispensable for securing a lasting order. Machiavelli, with chilling clarity, states, "Injuries ought to be done all at one time so that being tasted less, they offend less, while benefits should be dispensed little by little so that they may be savored more." This principle is paramount for the prince who seeks to stand alone and become unshakable. If rivals must be eliminated, if structures of opposition must be dismantled, or if a new legal framework must be imposed, these acts must be executed swiftly, decisively, and comprehensively. Prolonged campaigns of oppression, piecemeal reforms, or drawn-out conflicts merely prolong agony, foster deep-seated resentment, and create fertile ground for future rebellion. A single surgical strike, however brutal in its immediate impact, creates a clear end state, leaving no room for doubt or lingering opposition. The shock is absorbed, the new reality is established, and the path to stability is cleared, often through the very magnitude of the initial overwhelming action. Consider a scenario where a prince inherits a realm rife with competing factions, each vying for influence and undermining his authority. An idealist might attempt to placate, to negotiate, to build consensus, a slow, agonizing process that only exposes weakness and invites further challenges. The Machiavellian prince, however, identifies the core sources of opposition, waits for an opportune moment, perhaps a perceived vulnerability in his own position that could be inverted, or a misstep by his adversaries, and then acts. He strikes once, decisively removing the primary threats, perhaps through exile, imprisonment, or even execution. The shock ensures compliance from the remaining populace, and the sheer audacity of his solitary action establishes his unchallengeable authority. This decisive act is the moment when the prince, having prepared his mind and his strategy, reveals his true unshakable nature to the world, severing the last threads of potential reliance on others by rendering them incapable of opposing him. Yet, the true victory is not merely the event, but the consolidation and the new order that it ushers in. The prince who stands alone does not rest on his laurels after the masterstroke. He immediately pivots to establishing the foundations of his power in a manner that perpetuates his unshakable autonomy. This involves the rapid implementation of new laws, the establishment of loyal institutions, and the careful shaping of public memory to legitimize his actions and his new solitary reign. He creates a framework that ensures the continued stability and prosperity of his state, whether that state is a nation, an organization, or his own personal domain of influence, rendering it impervious to the whims of Fortuna or the perfidy of men. This process of consolidation is about creating a self-reinforcing system where the prince's power is not just acknowledged, but deeply embedded in the very fabric of the new order. He might generously distribute benefits to those who remain neutral or offered cautious support, ensuring their immediate allegiance. He might create new councils or administrative bodies, staffed by individuals entirely dependent on his favor, thus preventing the emergence of new power centers. The goal is to make his solitary authority not just a reality, but the only reality, the indispensable guarantor of peace and prosperity. The benefits, dispensed gradually, foster loyalty and contentment, reinforcing the image of a benevolent yet utterly firm ruler. This methodical post-strike engineering of the state ensures that his individual strength is not merely ephemeral, but a lasting structural component of the established order, a monument to his strategic genius. Finally, we arrive at the philosophical conclusion regarding the nature of power. The journey to become unshakable and to stand alone culminates in a profound understanding. Supreme power is neither a question of inherent goodness nor intrinsic evil, but of absolute efficacy. It is the capacity to strip away all illusions, to see the world as it truly is, a brutal arena of competing interests and fleeting loyalties, and to possess the indomitable courage to act decisively in accordance with that harsh vision. The unshakable prince is not bound by the moral strictures that cripple the idealist. He is not swayed by the pleas of the weak or the empty promises of the treacherous. He is a force of nature, operating on a higher plane of strategic calculation, where every action is weighed against its ultimate impact on the stability and longevity of his state. His power emanates from within, from an unwavering self-reliance, an acute understanding of human frailties, and an unflinching willingness to do what is necessary to secure his autonomy. To stand alone, therefore, is to become the ultimate architect of your own destiny, immune to external pressures, internal doubts, or the fickle tides of fortune. It is to construct a personal throne, not of gilded wood, but of unyielding resolve and strategic brilliance, a throne that endures not through popular love or fragile alliances, but through the sheer, unassailable force of your own sovereign will. This is the enduring legacy of the Machiavellian prince, to build a power so robust, so autonomous, that it withstands the test of time, an eternal testament to the individual who dared to see the world as it truly is and had the fortitude to master it entirely by himself.